So this is Bell Forest, and this is where you may know that we normally do our wildflower walk on Victoria Day weekend, but this year is different. So this year what we're going to try to do is do a virtual wildflower walk and see most of the same things that we normally would on the big walk that Jim Goltz usually leads. I guess I should have introduced myself earlier. I'm George Peabody, and I'm the administrator of the Meduxnekeag River Association. And the Meduxnekeag River Association owns Bell Forest. We bought it as one of our Meduxnekeag Valley Nature Preserve properties in 2003, 2004. We have about 900 acres now of protected nature preserve in the Meduxnekeag watershed. So we can start right at the start. Bell Forest is a really rich Appalachian hardwood forest site, and it shows its richness, particularly in the understory plants, right from the roadside in. If we're looking over here, the white flowers are bloodroot. The little leaves there are Dutchman's breeches. We'll see them in flower, I think, later on. There's red trillium in leaf there. This little yellow-brown flower is trout lily. Gets its name from the markings on the leaf that are sort of like the underbelly of a speckled trout. And other places, there's like a scientific measure of rarity for plants, and they're described as S1 through S5, with the lowest numbers the most rare. Black raspberry is a S1, S2. Bloodroot is not really that rare. It's S4 into S5, but it's not found evenly throughout the province. So we've got a lot of it in this area. Other parts of the province will have very little of it. And we can move into the woods now. This is another one of the rare plants from the understory plants in Appalachian hardwood forest. This one is blue cohosh. And it grows fairly thickly throughout this area right here. If you look down there, you can see that there's what we call a seepage zone where it's damp, and in the spring there's often a little bit of running water. Sometimes we get water coming down through here, so this gets more moisture. Blue cohosh is a S2 to S3 plant in rarity in New Brunswick. It will have, you can see it's in bud here. It has sort of pale yellow flowers. It's a little late this year. Everything seems to be a little late this spring. Gets its name, blue cohosh. Let's see if I can find, here we go. This is the last year's, and this is the berry that it produces. It's not, I shouldn't say it's not really a berry as such. It's the blue skin covers a fairly, there's not very much flesh to it. This is American beech. It's one of the, used to be one of the the more common trees in the forest, hardwood forests in this part of New Brunswick. You can see the marks, the lesions in it here. This is beech canker. It's a disease that the European beech, which are relatives, are subject to, and it got into North America when Queen Victoria, bless her heart, we just finished the Victoria Day weekend, when Queen Victoria sent a present of European beech trees to Halifax, where they were planted either in Point Pleasant Park or the public gardens, I'm not sure which. The canker came with it. The European beech are resistant to the canker and it doesn't kill them, but it spread to the American beech and has slowly been spreading out of Halifax ever since. It arrived in this part of New Brunswick in the 1950s, I think, and has killed almost all the large old beech trees in New Brunswick and is spreading regularly. I can't see any sign of the canker in this one. There's moss growing on it and lichens, but no sign of the canker in it, although it's within 2 meters, 3 meters of one which is infested with it. So this is a good sign, and we'll keep an eye on it and hope that it continues clear. This is another one of the rare species. This is called plantain-leafed sedge. It's the only sedge that has these quite wide, long, lined leaves. It's in flower now. Little flower, yellowy flower spikes there. It's a S1 to S2 plant in New Brunswick. Not found in very many places. This little flower that's closed up, waiting for the sun to get up a little bit more. This is spring beauty. It's another one of the spring ephemerals. Its scientific name is Claytonia. Dutchman's breeches here, and black raspberry, which is showing one of its characteristics. Black raspberry you can tell from the more common red raspberry because of this sort of blush that rubs off on the stalk, and the prickles are larger but not as thick as they are on red raspberry. It also has the habit of rooting itself where its tip touches the ground. So this one's growing up like that, has dropped down to the ground there, and has put down roots, and will produce another plant from where the roots push down. It'll produce another stem coming up through there. There's another rare, there's a big patch of plantain leaf sedge here. There's another rare plant just starting in there. Oh, that's maidenhair fern starting there. It's usually at least a week ahead of this, maybe more at this time of year. So late spring, not as many rare plants. This is pretty much classic Appalachian hardwood forest through here. Widely spaced trees, all of the species, a lot of maple as well, which would be sort of the core species now that American beech is less common. There's butternut in here, there's basswood, ironwood. This is wild ginger here. You can see the recumbent flower. Usually this one's lifted a little bit, but often they're like this one, right flat on the ground. You can see both raspberry types right here side by side. This is the more common red raspberry. This is the black raspberry. And the black raspberry does produce fruit later in the summer generally than the red raspberry, and it's not blackberry, that's another fruiting cane entirely. Very tasty fruit too if you're in here at the right time. Also bears that seem to like them particularly. This is a plant that is one of the most important ones you can learn to recognize in the forest. Hard to identify right now because it hasn't started to leaf out yet, and it doesn't seem to have any of last year's berries remaining on it. But this is poison ivy. People unfamiliar with it often think of poison ivy as a vine, and sometimes it is, but the more common one around here is a bush form. It usually has started to leaf out, just beginning. You can see it's in bud there. All parts of the plant are poisonous, and poisonous in the sense that it will cause your immune system to produce a reaction to it. Usually the second time you get into it, you'll get the rash rather than the first time. Can be very annoying. It's learn to recognize it and avoid it. We'll try to do a short video later when it's leafed out in a month or so, and you can get a better sense of what it looks like. The end of the walk through Bell Forest. We've wound down on the old woods road through Appalachian hardwood forest stands, and we've reached the banks of the Meduxnekeag River, which is a little bit high for the time of year. Usually it isn't carrying quite as much water. Good for canoeing now though, and will be for a while longer, especially if we get the wet weather that's forecast in a week or two. There's a final shrub here, not in flower yet. This is hobble bush, or sometimes called moose wood, both because moose like to nip the ends off it, and because when the buds are first coming out, they maybe have some sort of a resemblance to a moose's antlers when they're in the velvet stage. It's a not uncommon forest shrub. Will have quite a large and showy white flower, though the white parts are mostly the bracts, and there's a little center, greenish white center with the actual flower in it. Sort of holds it out like that. This is a late spring. Almost every year that we've done this, the purple violets, there would be bunches of purple violets in bloom. The moosewood would actually have been just finishing blossoming. We'd be lucky to find much bloodroot in flower, except in the very latest and shadiest places. Today, lots of bloodroot, no purple violets. Moosewood hasn't even started to bloom yet. The northern maidenhair fern just emerging and not anywhere close to getting its final form and size. So late spring, we're at least a week, maybe 10 days behind where we would normally be. and the leaves are not even starting to come out on most of the hardwood trees yet. Whereas quite often the Victoria Day weekend, they'd be just starting to unfurl so that you could get a really green sense of the treetops, and often hard to see some of the birds. We've seen birds this morning, very evident in the trees because there's no leaf camouflage for them yet. So that's a virtual walk through Bell Forest.